Welcome back to Climate Matters. I'm Edie Lush, your host, and I'm very pleased to still have Anouka Dhadda with us. She's just about recovered. So, Anouka, we're going to bring up another subject very close to my heart, actually, that is a source of carbon emissions that doesn't show up explicitly in your 10 points. It's food. And estimates are that between a quarter and a third of carbon emissions come from our food system. So just tell us why those points don't tackle it head on.
So I think there's kind of two parts to the food piece, which is people's consumption of and farmers' production of, right? And so on the latter, we do kind of have a nature, or it did include a nature for climate fund, but as is always the way, there's about 20 other strategies that were written that do look at how we can also produce in a better way. But I also think for the UK national picture, if you look at where the kind of like the big set of emissions were, it is things like transport and buildings. Right. So it was a strategic call to tackle the bits that were huge. But as you say, as an international strategy, actually this point about circularity and kind of agriculture and food are quite big issues that the world will need to look at.
Yeah, so 25 to 33% from food is transportation, as you said, which you've covered, protecting the natural environment, that probably comes into it, agricultural techniques, maybe regenerative agriculture. We've got two folks focused on food in our studio, one actually lurking virtually over Anouka's shoulder. Let's start with Fadi from Aerofarms. Aerofarms general manager here in the Emirates in Abu Dhabi, I believe you're based. Yes, is that right?
Yes, in Abu Dhabi, and thank you for having me.
Pleasure. Tell us about your work and how it contributes to net zero.
So Aerofarms is the world leader in vertical farming. We're a US-based company, head office in New Jersey, and our first international establishment is in Abu Dhabi. We started in Abu Dhabi more than 2 years ago, specifically looking into the ag-tech ecosystem of this region. And we're looking mainly into two folds. First, the plant science behind what seeds and what greens are needed. And secondly, in terms of technology and technology-enabled agriculture.
Interesting. And how does it relate to net zero?
As you mentioned, so agriculture contributes between 25 to 33% of greenhouse gases. We're not going to get rid of agriculture because we need to feed the population, and the population actually, it's increasing. We just got about 8 billion a month ago. So we need to feed those people, and not only we're increasing the trends in terms of immigration and centers of population. People are immigrating towards cities. Cities are growing, so there's more urbanization and less people working in agriculture. So there are two folds to that: feeding people and sourcing the food for those additional people. This is where our philosophy comes, where we believe that urban farming is critical to feed people within the realms of cities, to feed them in a healthy way, in a very sustainable way. Now, how does this contribute to the general question of net zero? In agriculture, in general, each kilogram of produce travels 1,500 kilometers around the world. This is on average. So transportation is key when it comes to pollution and transportation. Secondly, it's wasted. The traditional farming method, there's lots of wastage. It's accounted that there's about 40% of whatever gets produced on the planet never gets to the shelves of supermarkets or to be consumed by actual human beings. So there's lots of wastage. And thirdly, the aspect of storage, warehousing, and cooling, which contributes also a lot in terms of the carbon footprint. So going with indoor vertical farming within the vicinity of cities, you're completely avoiding those carbon sources.
Interesting. Anouka, I'm going to come to you for your reaction, but let's bring in our other guest lurking over your shoulder there, and it looks like mine too. Nicole Roque, senior analyst from the Good Food Institute. Nicole, you propose a provocative question. Can veganism help counter climate change? How do you answer?
Yeah, thank you so much. So I think All super relevant points that have come up so far. Central to all these discussions is the fact that our current food system is ill-equipped to handle sort of the accumulating effects of the climate crisis. But further than that, it's food and agriculture that are also directly worsening some of these global environmental trends. Central to that discussion is the animal agriculture industry. Animal agriculture is responsible for almost 15% of all greenhouse gas emissions, uses about 75% of all agricultural land, yet only provides us with about 33% of our global protein supply. The work that we do at the Good Food Institute India specifically is on addressing this head on. So how do we build a more secure, sustainable, and just food system, keeping all of this in mind? Specifically with relevance to India, as global populations increase as well as incomes increase, we're going to sort of need to reimagine a food system that can guarantee both food as well as nutritional security while mitigating some of these human-induced environmental degradation and building more resilience into our agricultural production. So we believe that in order to succeed and in order to be able to do that, we're going to need structural changes both at the production as well as at consumption levels in the area of food and nutrition. So instead of encouraging consumers to eat less meat, we're going to need to scale solutions that can actually slash the climate impacts of those behaviors. And we believe one of the
those solutions, because you've got a few different ones, right? So tell me about those solutions that you can scale.
Yeah, so in order to be able to do that, we believe that we need to be able to make the meat, egg, and dairy products that people love, but in more sustainable and efficient ways. So we can do that by essentially creating those proteins directly from plants, using fermentation technology, or using animal cell agriculture to create products that are similar to their animal-derived counterparts, both in terms of nutrition, functionality, taste, cultural resonance, that use a fraction of those resources.
Relieved that I wasn't about to be told I have to go vegan, so it's already improved there. I think let's take this in the two parts. So the production and the consumption, as we've just kind of covered. I think completely agree actually with kind of Fanny's comments. I think precision agriculture is the key here. Not just because it's important for emissions, but actually because if you are more precise in how you are utilising these things that cost you money as a farmer, right? Like your fertiliser costs money to buy, then that is a benefit for you and for the environment. Things like, drones all sound very grand, but will probably become part of our way of life. Gene editing as well. So how can you make our crops more resilient because it is getting warmer? And I think and just a kind of anecdote, I remember at COP26, an African negotiator actually saying to me, when I asked, do people care about climate change in your home country? And he said, they actually talk to me about their crops failing and, having to walk further for their resources. And so I think that kind of frontline bit is quite important. On the kind of at home, we already are starting to see, so moving towards the consumption bit, people being more accepting of what's called wonky veg. So things not looking perfect, but they're still delicious. And, there is I think the consumption side is harder for this sector, right? Because certainly in the UK, and I'm sure in other places, people want their meat. They've grown up like that. They want their meat and 2 veg on every day. But as we've just heard, actually there are some alternatives that we can start to do through innovation. This is the buzzword of the day, but through innovation, and we're starting to see it be used in places like McDonald's, right? And that's, I think, a sign of cut through.
Yeah. How much, Nicole, is taste and how things taste important to what you do? I know it's getting away from the idea of how we can save the planet, but you have to bring people along, as Anouka's been saying, and you also have to meet them where they are in order to lead them to a different place. How does that affect what you do?
No, yeah, we completely agree. And honestly, if you sort of if you sort of aggregate all of the estimates accounting for this increasing trend in veganism, you're still going to see about 50 to 200% increase in meat demand over the next couple of decades, which all signs are pointing towards people wanting to eat meat. Meat is delicious. Meat brings families together. It's culturally resonant. And so it's really important that if you are looking to provide alternatives, they do have to meet consumer expectations with regard to taste, but also with regard to price. People aren't willing to repeatedly purchase products that go well beyond spending patterns that they're used to. And also consumers are taste driven at the end of the day. If these products don't satisfy their expectations in terms of how these conventionally derived meat products taste, they're not going to repeatedly purchase it. So we would say after price, it's probably the second most important factor that feeds into a consumer's choice of whether to eat and consume these products on a regular basis.
I interviewed David from Aerofarms, the founder. He usually brings along some of the leafy greens so that I can taste, and they are actually incredible. It's interesting that you're moving into berries as well. I know there's so much science involved in what you guys do, and the precision is really important, as well as education and bringing people along, bringing schools along, bringing communities along. Give us a flavor. That was a really appropriate joke there, of how you're able to do that, and how when you bring people into it, it amplifies what you're able to do.
As you mentioned, flavor is key. With, of course, the considerations that Nicole put for the environment, but people will not do anything for the environment unless they enjoy it or it matches their expectations. When Aerofarms started producing and our produce was on the shelf, we expected people to buy our produce just because we're sustainable, we're eco-friendly, there's no pesticides, no chemicals. But nobody is ready to pay a premium for anything unless they enjoy it. And this is where we figured out that it's all about flavor and the quality of produce that makes people purchase our produce, our leafy greens. Having said this, we're trying to make a shift in the attitude of consumers, moving away from the calorie calculations or building your diet on how many calories you eat into more what the nutrition are you consuming. How healthy is your body based on the nutrition that you're consuming. And this is where leafy greens comes into play. This is where Eat Your Salad comes into play. We're starting this program. It's already launched in the US in a couple of cities. It starts with high schools. So we have a modular small farm, which we call a community farm, which we equip schools where we educate people where greens come from. Some people think greens come from the supermarket. It's not. It comes from the ground, how they grow, and the methods of growing, and how they taste, and to enjoy eating salads, not only hot dogs and burgers.
So I'd love to hear, Anouka, you know, in the UK, there was a whole thing about wonky veg. We won't go into the bananas and Europe, but I'm interested in how fast you can change consumers' point of view. How fast can you change somebody who just isn't into it into somebody who's a believer?
Well, as someone whose partner isn't perhaps a believer, I'm testing this out firsthand. But I think the point that keeps on coming up across everyone's kind of contributions is cost, right? And this is why this remains quite a tricky thing, because there is a bit of a premium there. So it might be better, healthier, environmentally friendly. And I think that is the bit that will your economic incentive is, well, if it's more expensive, I'm not sure I'm going to buy it. But also, as we see kind of across the kind of global economies, recession and cost of living kind of becoming a key issue, it is quite I think this is one where it is just a challenge. And I think if we are able to make these things at scale, or, produce these things at scale, and Fadi will be able to tell me if this is totally going to ruin his business model. But how can we actually do that?
It's all about scalability.
And part of what we're seeing is it is actually cheaper often to make your meals from scratch. If you if you can bulk, I'm not going to direct people into how to do this, but I think there is a way through that people are starting to see. But part of it is, can we actually produce it for cheap?
If I'm going to wave the magic wand, you have a few seconds. Okay. What's the one thing you would like to achieve in the next, say, 1 year, Fadi?
Let me just follow up on what Anouka has mentioned. So, vertical farming or urban farming has been in practice for the past 12 to 15 years. Some models did not survive, which is the distributed urban farming where you farm on your balcony or on your roof. Other forms that also failed are the container methods. So the only companies that managed to survive and still exist and really put produce for people to consume are the companies that managed to scale up. And this is where Aerofarms comes in. We just opened a couple of months ago our largest farm in the world in Danville, Virginia. This is a farm that will produce 24 hours, 7 days a week, across the year, leafy greens, producing about 3 million pounds of leafy greens a year.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Nicole, we
So
can't
this is
come
what
back to you. Fadi, thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
being with us. Fadi,
you.
Anouka's going to stay where she is. Nicole, thank you for joining us. We'll be right back with one more concept for you, exploring the circular economy after this.